Roger neglected to mention my height. I have found that it's humbling when I keep myself short. In real life, I'm very tall and very blonde. I've lost my page 1. Is there a page 1 back there? Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I have to confess that when Pat Pattison began asking me to do a Berklee residency about 15 years ago, my reaction was complete disbelief. I left school in 10th grade. The very day I turned 16, I left, walked out the door, and never looked back. I have never regretted that decision. I was not made to be in a school. I do not play well with others. When I run with scissors, it's usually with the intention of sticking them into someone's back. But Pat is nothing if not persistent, and so here I am. Once I accepted Roger and Pat's kind invitation, and they mentioned that there was a keynote speech involved, I thought I would do the standard keynote. I would congratulate everyone on leaving school eventually and entering the wide world of the music business. I would offer some cautionary tales and have done with it. But the more I thought about that, the more I realized that I really had nothing to say about those things that dozens of other speakers didn't have to say. So instead, I thought I would speak about something that I know intimately, probably the only thing I know well enough to offer any words of wisdom on. I am a white, Jewish, brown-eyed, northern, gay, Russian and Polish descent, female artist. But of all those things, the only one that I lay claim to is being an artist. That's the only thing I can take credit for, because everything else is merely an accident of birth. One is born with talent. That is an accident of birth as well. But one makes oneself an artist. And as corny as it sounds, I believe in art. I believe that art has the power to heal the broken spirit, to succor the frightened soul, to redeem not just the listener or the watcher, but the artist as well, to make sense out of chaos, to hold a mirror up to the world when the world forgets what it looks like, to issue both a warning and an exaltation. To be born an artist is to be born an outlaw. I've said that over and over again this week, to looks of understanding on the part of people much younger than myself, and I'm so grateful to be able to pass that on, because I think that's one of the most frightening things when you grow up with talent. You search for your kind. You come to Berklee thinking that you will finally find them, and you discover eventually that if you're lucky, there will be a few people in your lifetime who really understand, but by and large, as an artist, you stand alone. And that's both glorious and horrible. To be born with the possibility of attaining what Nietzsche refers to as the aristocracy of merit, placing us above people who are born to be kings and queens. That's an accident of birth. Whereas I have sat with kings and queens, and they have asked for my opinion, because I attained the aristocracy that my talent entitled me to. We are dangerous, we artists, because we accept nothing at face value, including our own worth. We question everything. We always start with why and we end with, yes, but then why? We follow all problems to the source. We question all systems. We never stop searching. It's no accident that Plato calls for the banishment of artists in his perfect society before he banishes anyone. We are, by nature, outlaws, as I said, and art, by nature, is seditious. Art accepts no truth but its own. Art insists on being seen and on being heard, whether we want to or not. Art just is. When our trust in politics has run out, when our faith in humanity has run out, art is there to make sense out of chaos. To be an artist is to simultaneously occupy heaven and hell. We're born with our talent. We can nurture it. We can protect it. We can make it our own, but we cannot take full credit for it because the talent is a grace. It's a gift. And the talent we bear is ephemeral. There's not an artist alive who can honestly tell you where their inspiration comes from. Those that do are lying through their teeth. We have no idea. If we knew, every piece of art would be a great piece of art. But it's ephemeral. And because it's ephemeral, it's frightening. No singer can guarantee that on this particular night their voice will be at its best. No player can promise you that they'll take their greatest solo on your night. There are too many random elements. There are too many things working against us, just the physical elements alone. Did I walk too far? Did I walk too fast? Did I rise too early? Did I rise too late? Did I eat too much? Did I not eat enough? All of these things affect us and our instruments, which misbehave even under the best of circumstances. And there are also the intangibles. Did I look in the mirror when I changed my clothes and decide yet again that I hate my body? Am I embarrassed by it when I go on stage? Did I leave too much of my heart at home when my heart belongs right here, doing the work that I'm meant to do? All of these things affect us. And because they're so completely out of control, very often we seek to control the world around us instead. Our biggest fear, of course, is that since the talent is so ephemeral, it will dry up and it will leave us alone and naked without its support. Because when you're born with a great talent, you come to rely on that talent to make you special, to hold you at night when there's no one there, to remind you that you are, in fact, important when the entire world says to you, that's just silly. Go be a lawyer. Go be a dentist. Go be a doctor. Do something with your life. Anything other than this. We fear that our talent will leave us naked without its strength and its protection, and because of that fear, we become jealous guardians of our superstitions, our rules and regulations, and our illusory ability to control the world around us. Even I myself, at 59, having been a professional performer since I was the age of 13, even I find myself often saying, well, more me is always a good thing. Keep feeding me. Keep feeding me. Keep feeding me. And if we don't watch it, that heaven turns into hell. I haven't had a hit record in decades. I refer to myself as semi-famous. What that means to me is I get to earn a living doing music. I don't have to take a job at Starbucks. I don't have to have a day job. Being Janis Ian is my day job. And on a week like this, believe me, it's quite a thorough job. I'm well known enough to get enough work to support myself and support myself well, but I'm not so well known that I need a retinue to stand between me and the world. But I have had platinum records in pretty much every Western country. And I've toured behind all of them, and I remember the fear. It's hard to be a commodity. And yet the only way to earn a living as an artist is to be a commodity of one sort or another. We sell soap, we artists. We sell soap. There's no way around it if you want to earn a living. Our only hope is to make our soap just a bit better than the soap of the next person's, to make the audience aware that our soap exists, and then to try and keep our soap as pure as possible. It's easy to become overwhelmed with the amount of people pressing you for decisions and impinging on your time. Odetta told me when I was 16, always remember, you do not work for them. They work for you. But a scant few months before she died, my cherished friend told me that she had not been able to live up to those words herself. We artists scare too easily. We're surrounded by people who earn their livings through us. My U.S. booking agents would have me spend all my time on the road so that they can make their commissions. My foreign booking agents can't understand why I don't want to spend a year in Japan or in England. My recording affiliates want me to spend all of my time touring behind my records when they're released in their countries so that they can sell CDs and make their money back. My co-writers would like me home in Nashville more often so that we can write more songs. My business managers want me to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, so I'm safe in my old age. And my partner, Pat, would just like to see me once in a while. It's easy to become overwhelmed. And when you become overwhelmed, you begin to say no to everything, because that's the only control you feel you have. And that being overwhelmed is what leads to the wretched excesses that we watch on television and read about in the magazines every day. I have toured with a U.S. artist who insists that a barber chair be brought in so that she can have her makeup done while she sits comfortably in it. It never occurs to her that someone has to haul that chair up 4 flights of stairs in an old theater. I've watched another American artist show up with 15 outfits and then demand that somebody be found to iron and press them all and hang them neatly on a rack with the matching shoes in front of each, so that at the last minute she can decide which one to wear. I toured in Australia after Diana Ross, playing all the same venues, visiting the same television stations, and it was appalling how frightened the crew were of me, because she had just come through. That kind of behavior is unconscionable. It's appalling. But we, as artists and commodities, become surrounded by people in whose best interest it is to keep us as ignorant and as childish as possible, and to cater to those whims, so that if Diana Ross says, "I really don't like people staring at me," suddenly it's in the contract. No one look at the artist. You think I'm joking. This is in contracts. The worst example I ever saw, and the most humiliating to me as a representative of artists, was when I toured Ireland with a promoter named Jim Aiken. He was the sort of promoter that you could do a handshake deal with, and you knew that you would get paid fair and square. And he came on tour with me, and he said, "Oh, my wife is a huge fan. Would you sign this for her?" And I said, "Sure, and let me invite her to some shows." Well, she never came. And I went back 2 years later, and I toured again, and I said, "Is your wife coming?" And he said, "Oh, I don't think so." It was only in my 3rd tour that he trusted me enough to bring his wife. And he brought her backstage at my request, and I politely thanked her for not minding that Jim had spent the last 3 weeks with me on tour. I said my goodbyes, and then I said to him, "She's a lovely woman. Why did this take so long?" He said that the last time he had introduced her to an artist that she loved, the artist had been polite, had shaken her hand, and then had asked to speak with Jim privately, and had said in no uncertain terms, "When I am on tour with you, I am the only woman in your life. I do not want to see that woman near me again." I don't excuse that behavior, but I do seek to explain it and to warn you against it. This woman is extremely famous. This woman is extremely healthy and wealthy and unhappy, and serves her right, because she's left a legacy of fear behind her. And if there's anything as artists that we are responsible for to the community, it is to ease their terror. I digress. We live in a state of fear as artists. Our booking agents will fire us. Our managers will leave us. There will be nothing left for us. Everyone will desert us, and there'll be nothing. It doesn't look like that to people on the outside, but that's what it feels like on the inside. And sometimes, as you heard from these stories, that turns us into monsters. But concurrent with hell, there is always heaven. A friend of mine asked me what it was like when I was in the middle of a song or a project. She said, "You are so concentrated in those moments, I do believe the world could fall apart and you would not notice." And she was right. The Buddhists speak of being in the moment. Well, when you're in that moment of creation, nothing else exists. You're moving so fast and so slowly at the same time that you encompass a universe. I told her, when she asked what it was like, that it was like being on the back of a runaway horse without a saddle or a bridle, as you seek desperately to hang on, hoping you don't fall off before the horse is done with you. And when you're finished, you realize that you've just had the ride of your life. That's how I put it politely. If I had been saying it to a close friend, I would have said, "You know what? It beats the best sex you've ever had. Nothing comes close. And that's why, as artists, we are so driven. That's why we keep going back for that one singular moment that puts us on a par with God, that allows us to be creators, that stands us above all of the people out there who will never know that moment but through our work. Anyone who lives with a dedicated artist knows that they will never be wife or husband to that artist. They will always be mistress. And as I kept telling my classes, that's all right. It's not unfair. It is in the nature of an artist to take everything offered, to still want more, to question every moment. There's a classic story about Charles Baudelaire breaking up with his mistress. And he suddenly rose from the bed where they'd been arguing, and he ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror at his tears, and she said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I may need these someday. I want to know what I look like." Now that's both horrifying and exalting, because you can't use your talent as an excuse for being a jerk. It just doesn't work that way. The world has enough ways to knock you down without you giving them excuses. As an artist, I believe that it is my job to make sense out of chaos, to speak the unspeakable, to reveal what is hidden, to make sure that no one forgets their history, particularly the young artists who think that their history began and ended with the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, or if they're educated, maybe with the Greeks, who don't realize that our history as artists goes back to the very first person living in a cave who came home from the hunt and drew a picture of that hunt on the walls. Whatever my lineage is as a Jew, whatever my lineage is as an American, my lineage as an artist stands above all of that. And there comes a point in every artist's life when they must decide, will you be a citizen of a country or will you be a citizen of the world? Because you cannot be both. Artists don't start wars. Artists understand that fighting over a piece of land is absurd. Artists know these things instinctively. Artists don't go into politics. Who would want to embarrass their work that way? I try to live a life congruent with my vision of what an artist is. I am all too aware that I stand upon the bones of those who went before me. I am all too aware that the higher I stand on those bones, the farther I can see. And so when I look at my lineage, I try to look at my lineage as an unbroken continuum that began with the first person who thought and brings me to this day among people who think. If we allow ourselves and our lives as artists to become corrupted until we care more for ourselves than we care for our work, then we're no longer standing on that pile of bones. And the work will forget us. But it's hard in this increasingly fragmented world to maintain the energy and the concentration and the openness that's required to be an artist when there are so many temptations. We are lucky, though. We in this room are lucky because we are in the theater. The theater makes us strong. The theater is ritual. The theater is tradition. Visual artists don't have a theater. Musicians have theater. Actors have theater. Writers have theater. We're fortunate. If we didn't have ritual and tradition, we would fall apart at the seams. Think of the amount of ritual and tradition you go through every day. You pass someone in the street, you nod at them. You smile to show that you're not a threat. You shake hands with your right hand to prove there's no sword in it. You hold a napkin in your lap so you don't spill food all over your host's floor. These things are all tradition and ritual. The theater has its own thousands of tiny rituals. We never say, good luck. It's tempting the fates who may be listening, and they may decide to screw with us and instead break your leg. So we say, break a leg, so that if the fates are watching, they don't. We don't whistle backstage, because in the old days, that used to be a signal for the scaffolding to come down, and it would come down on your head. We are superstitious, and those of us who are not are. Theater is ritual, and ritual is magic. The Catholic Church knows that. Costumes, props, incense, all of the things that you use to give the illusion that you are bigger than most. In theater, we must be bigger than most. Why else are we here? At the end of the day, that's what we artists do. We make magic. We are alchemists of the soul. We turn lead into gold, sorrow into song. We take nothing, thin air, and we beat it into a wedding band. We transmute the ordinary happenstance of life, turning coal into diamonds, emeralds. We make it visible so that when times get really hard, we can say, here's a song about your life. Here's a film that shows you who you can be. Here's a play, here's a vision. Here's a moment to grab hold of and cherish. Our great strength and our great privilege is to hold on to the dreams of those around us, to speak for the silent, to give voice to the voiceless, so that when all hope is gone, when humanity forgets, we are there to remind them. It's our job to grasp their longing and their yearning because they can't do it for themselves. It's our job to grab those things in our hands and hold them safe. That's alchemy at its best, to transform the hopes and fears of a world, to hold a mirror up to their eyes and let them see not just what they think they are, but what they truly are and what they can become. We offer them redemption through truth. And that's what it is in my world to be an artist in the highest sense. To serve. To live in service to your talent, to your work, to the community that supports you. To live in service to your gift. So that for the non-artist, there is someone there to bring order out of chaos. And when the world collides with itself and all the balls that everyone is juggling up in the air not only come crashing to the ground, but beat them about the head. When life gets so hard that people forget they even know how to dream, we are there. We are there with their dreams that we have kept safe. We are there to say, here are your dreams. You can have them again, because I've held them for you. That's our job. We are there with them from cradle to grave. We sing them into this world and we sing them out. We are the past and we are the future. We are the best that humanity has to offer. We are artists, and that is our job. There's a great Zen parable. In Japan, they have something called the living treasure, where if you're considered a great artist whose work and methodology is in danger of dying out, the government says you are a living treasure and we will support you. And in turn, you will teach certain students to carry on your tradition. Now, there was a young Japanese brush painter, and he was picked to study with a living artist, and so he went from his small town to study with this idol. And he walked in the first day, and his teacher said, "Draw me a fish." And so, very quickly, he drew the most beautiful fish. And the teacher, a few minutes later, looked at it, tore it up, and said, "Thank you, come tomorrow." The boy went away a little confused, but he thought, well, maybe I just didn't draw beautifully enough. I'll do better tomorrow. So the next day, he came to the teacher, and he said, "Here." And the teacher said, "Thank you." He tore it up, let the pieces fall to the floor, and said, "Come back tomorrow." The next day they went fishing, and the boy caught a fish, and the teacher gave him his own room. And there was the fish, beautifully laid out on a stand, and he said, "You will come here every day and you will draw this fish once." And so the boy came every day to draw the same fish, and every day at the end of the day, his teacher looked at the drawing, tore it up, let the pieces fall to the floor, and said, "Come back tomorrow." Well, you can imagine as artists what that did to him. He went through all the stages. First he thought he wasn't good enough. Then he thought he was too good and the teacher was too old. Then he thought the teacher was an idiot. Then he thought the teacher really didn't understand his art because the teacher came from a different form. He went through all the stages, including grief. He beat himself up and beat himself up. He lifted himself up and lifted himself up. The fish began to rot. The flesh fell from the bones. The stench became so overwhelming that the boy had to tie a kerchief around his face to walk into the room. Then the beetles came, and he watched as they ate the carcass. And as he watched, he kept trying to draw the fish. And as he kept drawing the fish, the teacher kept coming in and saying, "That's very nice. Come tomorrow." Well, he became a bit demoralized. He was outraged at the futility of his efforts, but he persisted because he couldn't imagine facing his family. He persisted through the maggots. He persisted through the beetles, though his own stomach rebelled and his eyes could barely stand to look anymore because they were watering so hard. Until one day, months and months later, only the bones remained. And he walked in that morning so discouraged that he thought of taking his own life. And he looked at these bones, and he began to cry. And as he cried, he looked at the bones through the lenses of his tears. And as he looked, a miracle happened. He began to see the fish from the outside, and then from the inside. And he watched as from the bones, the flesh grew back. And he began to paint from the inside out. And when he finished, it was not the most beautiful fish anyone had ever seen, but it was the essence of a fish. And that day, his master walked in and looked at it and said, "I have nothing else to teach you. You are now a master. Go home." Now, to me, that is what we do. We learn to see from the inside out. In my entire life as a songwriter, as a writer, I have tried to see the world from the inside out, and yet, after 50-odd years as a musician, that story tells it more eloquently than I ever will. I thank you for your time.